Hello again, my little horrorlings. Welcome back. Gather round and Mama will tell you some more nightmare-inducing stories. In 1973, when I was 8, my family lived in an old farmhouse in rural southern Ohio. The closest house was about 1 mile away. The house we lived in was on a working farm with a barn, a windmill, a water pump, several acres of fields, a small creek, and it all backed up to a line of trees about half a mile behind the house. The house was built in the 1850s. It had a root cellar and 2 stories. The upstairs had 3 large bedrooms and a small bathroom with an old metal clawfoot bathtub. Wide stairs terminated at the top of the north end of the large landing, and a walkway ran from the top of the stairs along the west wall, past my sister's bedroom, before turning east. The walkway then passed my parents' room, my room, and ended at the bathroom. At the landing, on the north end, there was a large window. I should mention that the ceilings were about 20 feet tall, so the window on the north wall started about 8 feet above the floor. My room was on the south end of the landing/walkway. One January night I needed to heed the call of nature, so I got out of bed and walked to the door. Across the upper walkway and landing was a figure. It was about 6 feet tall. Its face was silvery white and glowing. It had spiky, lightning bolt hair, and its body, while bipedal and humanoid, was ill-defined and not glowing. It was standing at the top of the landing, 40 feet away from me, and it was looking at me. I screamed. After what seemed like an eternity, my sleepy parents entered the common walkway area. After what seemed like an eternity, my sleepy parents finally entered the common walkway area. By this time, the creature had disappeared. My mother sent my dad downstairs to check out the house while she comforted me and checked on my younger sister. My sister slept through the whole incident. I stood rooted to my doorway out of terror while my dad investigated the downstairs. While my dad was downstairs, I heard the sounds of metal banging. It wasn't very loud, but it was loud enough for my mum and I to hear. The sound only lasted a few seconds. When my dad came upstairs, he reported that there was nothing downstairs. I asked him what the metal banging sounds were, and he said he hadn't heard anything. I'm not sure how, but somehow I managed to go back to sleep that night. I know my mum sat up with me until I did. That was the only time I saw something strange at this house, but we moved that summer. Now, we've all heard of places being haunted, but I'm convinced it was a person who was haunted in our house. Every house we lived in when I was younger, I was exposed to scary paranormal events. It all started when my stepsister moved in with us when I was about 9. She had a lot of anger and hate, and I'm sure that something latched onto her. I'm convinced it followed us through 3 moves. It started with coins dropping randomly from the ceiling, seemingly from nowhere. It then escalated to things being moved around and going missing, things being thrown and loud bangs in other parts of the house when we were home alone. She would tell us that she was waking up with marks on her in the morning, but I never believed her. Until one night, We had guests and she was away, so I had to sleep in her bed. I woke up with an unexplained scratch on my arm, and the air in the room just felt heavy and wrong. When we would go to bed at night, we would hear the sound of the dining room chairs scraping across the wooden floor, as if someone was pulling them out to sit down. Once, I was reading in my room when my stereo turned on by itself at full volume, playing radio static. My youngest sister was in our room watching TV when the wardrobe door slid slowly open by itself. She ran to get me, and when I got there to investigate, all the drawers were also open within that room. A few years in, and I'm watching a paranormal movie with my stepmom, I casually mention that nothing has happened for a few months since my stepsister had moved out. Then I look behind her and freeze. The sitting room door, which we kept closed in the evening, is open, and the cat, who would usually take this opportunity to be naughty and run upstairs to the kids' bedrooms, was standing with her fur on end, staring out the door into the hallway. It felt like whatever had been haunting us and my stepsister was letting us know that it was, in fact, still here. I don't really know where to begin with this story. It occurred between the ages of 9 and 16. I'm 28 now. I guess I'll just start at the beginning. My parents adopted me as a baby, and I never met my birth family until I was around 20. It was then that I learned that every woman in my birth family, sister, grandmother, late mother, etc., were all quite sensitive to the paranormal. So when I was 9, my family moved to a very nice house in St Helena, Napa, overlooking the valley. It was a beautiful 2-storey house, but in a weird way since it was on a hill. From the road, the second story was the first story, but from the backyard down the mountain, both floors were visible. Upstairs was the garage, linked to the main house by a breezeway leading to the laundry room. To the right there was the study. Straight ahead was a living room and the kitchen. A hallway ran parallel to the kitchen, meeting at a family/dining room where the front door sat, though none of us actually used it. Right next to that was the stairs. Oh, the dreaded stairs, leading down to the one long hallway connecting the bedrooms. Experiences began happening immediately after we moved in. Part of me believes it was drawn to the negative trauma I suffered as a child, but that's just a theory. The first of many experiences was when the whole family was at my middle school for a book fair. I remember having a sudden twisting in my gut when my parents got a call that our backyard was on fire. To this day, nobody knows how it happened. It just started. Then the real fun began. It started out slowly and only ever happened downstairs. My brothers and I would wake up and see a man walking back and forth on the patio, glancing through the French doors of our bedrooms as he passed. We never felt any malice from him though, and we all recall seeing him. What makes that particular bit interesting is that, from a child's perspective, it would usually be the male entity who would be malicious, while a female entity is more likely to be a protector. In my house, it was the polar opposite. Myself and my brothers felt a dark presence lurking downstairs in the hallway that would affect all three of us to the point where we would take the stairs 2 or 3 at a time as fast as possible. I would have recurring nightmares about struggling to get to the top of the stairs with something behind me. In one particular dream, I was reaching for the top stair and the entity caught me and stapled my mouth shut so I couldn't scream. Keep in mind, I was too young for these sorts of things to naturally come to me. In the beginning, the door to my bedroom would slam in the wee hours of the morning, so loudly it would wake my father. In the beginning, the door to my bedroom would slam in the wee hours of the morning, so loudly it would wake my father. He insisted it was a draft, even though no one else's door would do it, and again it slammed with massive force. We had to put a £10 bookend in front of it. Not much later, the entity in the hall would probe our rooms to see who was the most sensitive. My older brother, who slept at the end of the hall nearest to the darkness, outgrew his sensitivity, and my younger brother eventually stopped being sensitive as well, but I remained more sensitive than ever, and it knew. That's when I met her. At first, the entity introduced itself as a kind protector from the man on the balcony, but I knew that was a lie. She would stand at the far end of the hallway and wait. Not that she was actually there, there was no one there, but it was more a feeling of dread. It wasn't darkness or blackness, but more that it physically sucked in the light around it like a black hole. She would come to me in dreams as various entities, but the man would always show up and protect me. For about 7 years, I would wake up promptly at 3 a.m, sweating bullets, hearing someone running back and forth in the hallway, panting as they passed my room, repeatedly until around 5 a.m. when it began to get light. The first face-to-face incident with this creature was when I woke up, as usual, at 3 a.m. Like clockwork, I heard the panting and the pacing in the hallway. After around 20 minutes, I got too scared to sit there doing nothing, and I reached for the dresser by my bed and turned on the light. The panting and pacing stopped, and I waited through about 10 seconds of soul-crippling silence before it happened. Long, gnarly, shadowy fingers slowly gripped the door frame one by one. I heard the wood of the frame creak slightly as the wispy fingers pulled into the bedroom. Before my brain could process what I was seeing, I heard her gasp, audibly gasp. The fingers retreated in pain, and I sat in silence until the sun came up about 2 hours later. That was the first time I realised I had a weapon against this thing. I still don't fully understand it, but she couldn't exist in light. While that alone brought tears to my eyes recalling it, there was one other experience that haunts me to this day. Plenty of years had gone by. My father was a prominent doctor in the area, and he was planning on taking my mother to a fancy hospital gala the same night my little brother had a sleepover at a friend's house, and my older brother was away at college. It was the first time I had the house to myself at night. I begged them to reschedule or hire a babysitter. They told me I was old enough to be a babysitter and that I needed to just grow up. Everyone in my family them included, had experienced weird happenings, but they all preferred to turn a blind eye, so my pleas fell on deaf ears and I was left alone. I spent the first half of the evening upstairs, where it was safe, occasionally glancing towards the staircase for any activity from the living room, while the TV distracted me. At about 10 or 11 p.m. I remember thinking I was too old to be scared to be by myself. I could sleep downstairs alone if I wanted to. I kept the lights on upstairs and slowly descended the staircase, feeling the darkness getting closer with every step. When I reached the last step, I leaped to the light switch and hit it, illuminating the hallway, shaking violently. I hurried to my bedroom through the eerie quiet. My footsteps on the carpet were the only sound to break the silence. I finally slunk into my bedroom and quickly turned on the dresser light, jumping into bed as I stared into the lights shining through the downstairs. Going over in my head that all the doors were locked, all the windows were closed, and as long as these lights were on, I was safe. I eventually fell asleep. Unlike the usual times I woke up at night, this time was slightly different. I woke up suddenly, completely alert with the fight or flight response already kicked in. I was facing the wall, but I was absolutely terrified. I felt like if I moved or even breathed too loudly, it would spell immediate death. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, but was most likely only a few minutes before I mustered up the courage to roll over. When I finally did, my heart sank. All the lights in the house were off, and a womanly shadow was standing in the doorway. The thought that maybe it was my mother popped into my head before I realised that she was out with my father at the gala all night, and they were staying at a hotel till morning. I just sat there, frozen, locked in a gaze with this creature who had finally made it through the threshold of my doorframe and into my room, a feat she had yet to accomplish. I closed my eyes and repeated in my head, "It isn't real, it isn't real," like a personal mantra, trying to control my breathing as I shake and shiver violently. I decide to take a peek and see if she's still there. Surely she can't have come in further. I open my eyes. It's standing right over me, at the edge of my bed, looking down at me. Not with eyes. It had no eyes, but what it did have was a large, toothy grin amidst the wispy shadows of its body. I daren't scream or even move, but I held the gaze as I heard a deep rumble emanating from the swirling torrent of darkness that was this creature. I knew fear, but this was something different. I had never been this afraid before in my life. It was no longer creaks or shadows darting in the corner of your eye. I was face to face with something else, something not of this world, and it wanted me. I knew in this moment, as its mouth began to expand, that if I did nothing I would die. So I did the only thing I could think of in that moment. My body suddenly lurched upwards from the bed toward the entity, and I screamed at it. Not a scream of fear, but more of a war cry. It could try to kill me, but I wasn't planning on making it easy. My face almost went through it as I lurched up before it recoiled and let out an unearthly wail. I'm guessing it wasn't expecting resistance. I heard it as it left the room, feet on the carpet. Within moments, all the lights in the house were back on, and I just sat there, shivering in shock, until the dam broke and I began to cry. I cradled my pillow and rocked back and forth on the bed, sobbing, waiting for the sun to come up and for my parents to come home. Thank you for listening, my little horrorlings. Don't forget to leave a comment down below and let me know what you think of tonight's stories. Give this video a thumbs up and hit the notification bell to find out first about new videos. And whatever you do, don't forget to check for monsters underneath your bed. Sweet dreams.